Did you know that about a third of adults have issues with sleeping? And like 10% of us have insomnia. So, chances are if you're watching this, either you or someone you know and love can't sleep too well. And that's why I was thinking this video would be useful. It gives us a chance to, firstly, see why sleep's important. Secondarily, to examine some barriers that might get in the way of us being able to sleep wholly and happily. Thirdly, to calm down, Bam. Thirdly, to look at some solutions that might help us to rest up and sleep. Go to sleep. And then finally, maybe to talk a bit about how counselling can help us to sleep. Part 1. Why do we sleep? Firstly, rest and repair. Most of our muscle growth, our immune system fighting off invaders, a lot of physical actions go on in our body while we are completely nodded off. See, we're not just on standby when we're sleeping, but our body is actually really growing. It's installing all the updates it needs to keep going. Secondly, unlike Bun with his massive ears and good sense of nose, humans mostly sense the world using our eyes. And at night, as soon as it gets dark, we're not very good. Whereas predators, like this fearsome Felis catus, are out there hunting at night while it's dark. So we enter into low power mode and shut down to keep us safe from this ferocious beast that might eat us. And then finally, sleep is half good for our mental health, and boy do we potentially feel pretty darn moody and upset if we have not had it. Sleep helps us to process. Sometimes our dreams can really speak to us. If you are Jungian, then no doubt you can jump into those archetypes. We generally feel better, our mood is more improved, and we feel healthier and happier when we have been able to have a fairly good sleep routine and a good night's kip. Part 2. What barriers get in the way of sleep? Much of this video was inspired by the Nuffield Department of Clinical Neuroscience's talk on Love Your Brain and Sleep. I'll stick a link in the description because there's likely going to be more community events coming up. So when I heard this talk and I was told to avoid drinking caffeine after 4 PM, I was deeply upset because you see, I already love coffee. There's nothing nicer than having a nice espresso after a meal, but caffeine is a stimulant. It gets the body active, it gets the mind thinking. Little palpitations when you drink too much. Coffee isn't good when we're trying to sleep, and neither are other stimulants like nicotine. Yes, that means if you wake up in the middle of the night and think you're going to roll yourself a cigarette, it's kind of waking you up a little bit. And as well as nicotine, sugar. That late night pudding is going to go straight to the brain as energy and wake you the heck up. And you know what else we turn into sugar? Pretty much everything we eat. So if we are eating late at night, gosh, it's just going to get turned into sugar and wake us up as well. But it's not just physical stimulants that we consume. Exercise, go on Bun, cross the line, is also a stimulant. So though on the whole it might be good for our sleep hygiene, if we're hitting the gym at 10 to 11 at night and then trying to sleep by midnight, it's not going to work. We're going to be too pumped up, we're going to be too stimulated. The next thing that is stimulating is blue light. Yes, normally we wake up in the morning because of sunlight. Sunlight has a particular type of light that wakes us up. It helps us to synthesize the hormones we need to be awake. And we also get that blue light from normal lights, from television, and the biggest culprit is our devices, like our mobile phones, our tablets. They are really bad for blue light. In fact, I don't really trust myself to not check the YouTube Analytics app or doom scroll at night. So instead, I try plugging my charger in by my desk so I know I can't access my phone if I wake up in the middle of the night and wake myself up by the stimulation from both the blue lights and also the content. And while we're talking about light, let's talk a little bit about sunlight. I said earlier that sunlight helps us to synthesize certain hormones that help us with sleep. In fact, our bodies are pretty good at picking up on rhythm. Humans love routine. And we have a circadian rhythm, which is governed by time of day, and a lot of it's governed by sunlight. So, if we are not getting enough sunlight, or if it is that miserable time of year over the winter when there isn't very much light, then that can impact on our sleep. Not to mention that the sun is hot, and if it's too hot, or if it's too cold, that can also impact on how well we sleep. I mentioned routine as well, and if we are varying up the time we're going to bed, or if we have just flown somewhere or done a night shift and that knocks our circadian rhythm out, if we are jet lagged, then that can really impact on our sleep quality. So we're meant to try and go to bed about the same time each night and wake up about the same time each morning. Sensory distractions, like is it too bright where you're trying to sleep? Or maybe it's too noisy outside with cars rushing by. Or even those interoceptive things I just mentioned, being too hot or too cold at night. Pain is also a sense, and being in pain can really impact on our ability to sleep, which brings us on to some other physical health impacts that can make sleep really difficult. Some conditions can cause physical pain, or even just routine things like menstruation can cause cramping. It can be really difficult to sleep on. Routine colds and illness can mean that we overheat and are sweating at night, or we might get something called postnasal drip, where it's like we have to keep swallowing, and that distraction can make sleep hard. There are certain conditions that can cause spasms, like restless leg syndrome or Parkinson's, and your body moving can make drifting off hard. Tics with conditions like Tourette's can be really difficult to calm ourselves down to sleep. I suffer with a condition called tinnitus, which means I hear a constant high-pitched ringing in the ear. And many people can really struggle with their tinnitus when they're trying to kind of ignore it and they're in the silence of trying to rest. And then there are other conditions, like if we have bladder issues that might wake us up many times in the night. We might have sleep apnea, where we suddenly stop breathing, or may need a very noisy CPAP machine over our face to breathe, which again, the noise of it can be difficult to get off to sleep. And this list is in no way exhausted your physical health with whatever physical conditions you have, or neurodiversities, or mental conditions. All of these things will impact on your sleep quality and be very specific to you. The final thing I'm going to say about physicality or stuff we consume is about drugs, which are sedatives. Things like alcohol, for example. Drinking might help you fall off asleep just from inebriation. We start to sober up in the middle of the night, which wakes us up. And then other sedative medications that we're often given if we're struggling with sleep, like Valium or benzodiazepine, for example. It may help us go off to sleep, but we very quickly start to develop dependence on it, and dependence on a substance to sleep borders on addiction, and that can make sleep really tough. We might wake up in the middle of the night and be really drowsy. Sleepwalking is another condition. We might wake up from taking a benzo, wake up in the middle of the night and be prone to accidents. My general advice is that sedatives are really okay as a short-term solution. Let's say we're in the pangs of grief and we are just looking to be able to sleep. We've not slept in a week. But in the long term, any use of a sedative drug to help us fall off to sleep is probably going to make things worse. Let's talk a bit more about the main areas that I work with as a counsellor. So, stress, emotional issues, mental health difficulties, and the effects of trauma on sleep. I spend far too much time on my phone, and I think we are living in a world where we are constantly stimulated. We don't really get a chance to be bored in 2025. So it gets to bedtime, it's dark, there's no noise, there's no stimulation, there's no entertainment, and that's deeply uncomfortable. And all of the worries, the stresses, the thoughts that have been bobbling around in our mind Or suddenly they've got space to speak to us when they haven't really had chance to speak in the day. And all those strong feelings, those strong thoughts, those worries, they pop up and they sort of haunt us when we're just trying to get off and get to sleep. We might be plagued with stress. That task that we've been procrastinating on or haven't quite got done, that thing that is, pretty much beyond our control. All of a sudden at midnight, early on in the morning, all of a sudden that thing suddenly seems very important, and our brain is putting a lot of effort into telling us we must do it now. And this can make relaxing really tough. We're trying to settle down, let our mind wander off into nod, and instead it's trying to be a task manager. It's bringing up all these strong feelings, and the more we're trying to stop it, the more we try and force ourselves to fall asleep. I don't know if anyone's tried this. You're looking at the alarm, I've only got 4 hours to sleep now. I just force myself, I just try really hard to sleep. The more we try and do that, the more elusive sleep seems to be. And then if we add in some common mental health issues or life events, existential dread, grief, worry about how we've acted in the past, guilt at who we are or what we've done. If you chuck in there trauma is when something massive happens and we can't quite symbolize it in the mind or the body, so instead it just kind of lingers and comes out in dreams, night terrors, sleepwalking, waking up in sweats, reliving it in the midst of our sleep. All of that can make routine worries and stress and difficulty with boredom 100 times harder. If you're going through something, depression, let's say, then you're already fighting a really, really difficult, lonely battle. It's hard enduring depression, grief, suicidal thoughts, whatever it is you're going through. I admire you just for battling it. And you know what? It's difficult to endure stress and mental health problems when we're feeling healthy and well and optimistic and all that jazz, but how much harder is it when the reality is we're sleep deprived? We don't have the spoons in order to do all of the advice that's in this YouTube video I'm giving us. It's really difficult. So hats off to you for carrying on. And God, how nice it would be to be able to have a good night's sleep, to have a relief from the mood and the affliction that sleeplessness can bring, and add weight to what's already a tough thing, enduring mental health struggles. Before we move on to the next part around what helps us to sleep, I thought I'd just give you 30 seconds to take a look at the script so far. It may be as well that there's something that's been said so far that sort of resonates with you and you just want to take some time to process. And the reason why I'm holding the script out for you to see where I've based this talk on so far is the next part on do's and don'ts, on what helps us to sleep. Many of the points in the next part on solutions are actually just solutions to the barriers as well as some other tips. So if you can remember the barriers, it makes the solutions a lot easier to remember. Part 3. Tips for a good night's sleep. I'll do a quickfire round in a bit from all of the solutions from previous barriers, but first up, let's talk about some tips and solutions we've not covered. Worries, whether that be unfinished business and tasks we have to get done, or whether it be emotional worries and concerns, can weigh on us when we're trying to sleep and stop us falling off. It's been evidence that spending half an hour a day journaling, just writing about whatever's in our mind, slows the brain down and gives us a chance to process emotionally without judgment. It can be helpful, therefore, doing a diary. The other benefit of a diary is brains aren't that good at remembering. Our working memory can sequence what 7 things or so at most, and our long-term storage of tasks and burdens, to-dos, things that we wish we could just commit to mind doesn't go so well. A number of times I have forgotten some kind of scheduled appointment, and then it's dawned on me at night, this is happening tomorrow. And it just really plays on us when we sleep. So another advantage of having a diary rather than an emotional reflection diary is that we can use it to schedule tasks, worries, concerns, ideas that pop into our head. If I get a sudden creative idea for a short and it bumps up in there, useful just to jot a note down, whether that's on a pencil, pen diary, or whether it's just a little note on the phone. Avoid the blue lights. Whether it's just a note on the phone, it's helpful to have a place where we can jot worries down at night so they don't just swirl around in our brain and keep us up. And then the final kind of diary or journal that's useful to keep is a sleep diary if you're struggling. And a sleep diary, you'll find some templates online, but sleep diaries are quite specific. They go over things like what time did you go to bed, what did you eat before bed, what did you do to wind down, did you wake up, how many times did you wake up, when was your last cup of coffee. It just sort of dissects sleep. What happened? Were you sleeping with somebody? Were they snoring? Ask lots of questions about the night that we didn't sleep. So rather than it being a kind of black and white thing in our mind, I did or I didn't sleep, it means that we can look at the night before and say, last night I ate very late and then I was up at night, or I was exercising till quite late and then I didn't sleep, or I was really worried about a meeting at work the next day and it played on my mind. We can reflect on our sleeping styles, the things that are happening, things that have gone well and the things that haven't gone well, which gives us a bit more agency in the future. And it's sort of what I do as a counsellor in some ways. It's about asking people very specifically, what does it mean when you say you're struggling with sleep? Final thing I'm going to mention on stress and worries that might be going around in our mind and can be pretty distracting and take up a lot of our experience is to talk about mindfulness, relaxation techniques, sometimes heard it called meditation. So meditation in general, like deep breathing, can be good for us when we're trying to get to rest because it draws in oxygen and that goes straight to the brain. The other benefit of meditation is that it takes our mind off of thoughts or feelings or other things that are strong in the body, and it tries to center it on the breath or a body scan or noises that we can hear around us, and that just helps us to focus on one thing rather than many things like the tasks that you might have to do. The final, more long-term benefit of meditation, like mindfulness, is that it can create a meta-awareness where, rather than identifying with our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, our behaviours, watch my video on how to become more self-aware using a hot cross bun if you want to know more about that. It can create a meta-awareness. Mindfulness can be used so that we notice thoughts coming up, we notice feelings coming up, we notice the behaviours that we've done, and rather than identifying strongly with them and panicking, instead we can just notice them kind of drifting by like clouds drifting by above the earth. So let's say we're laying in bed and we're finding ourselves worrying or planning. We might say, worrying thoughts are passing by, planning thoughts are around, and a feeling of anxiousness is arising, and that can just stop it being quite so threatening. To this day, funny story, to this day, every time I stub my toe, which really hurts, the pain of it, every time I stub my toe, I'm always like, ooh, a feeling of pulsating is happening in the toe, and the kind of curiousness just kind of dulls it down a little bit, ironically. So if you take a look on YouTube, you will find a wealth of mindfulness meditations for sleep. Hope Therapy, a agency I'm part of, they have mindfulness sitting groups. And I wonder if I could teach some really simple mindfulness. Box breathing. Box breathing is Pretty simple to teach. I'll even stick a little GIF up on the side that helps with it. But just breathe in whilst counting to 4. Hold it whilst counting to 4. Exhale whilst counting to 4. Hold whilst counting to 4. Then inhale again. And this technique's really easy to remember. You just have to remember the number 4, which is useful because there are 4 sides to a box. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, inhale for 4. You might even want to do some imagery work, like picture the numbers. Picture the numbers like changing colour, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 as figures in your brain. And imagining that and counting it and focusing on the counting and the breathing and connecting in with the breath and noticing where the breath is in the body. Just being curious about the breathing itself can be mindful and help us to switch off from other distractions that can stop us sleeping. Mindfulness isn't everyone's cup of tea. For some folks, say we've experienced trauma, being present with the body and the silence of it can be really overwhelming, and I guess that's the same thing that comes up in the middle of the night in the darkness. One of my hobbies is running, and I find the slow rhythmic movements of a jog without any background music are really good places for me to be able to have some of that reflection, some of that mindfulness. And earlier I said that high intensity exercise just before bed isn't such a good idea, but I don't want to poo-poo exercise in general. One article from the Sleep Foundation suggests that exercise and sleep are bidirectional. E.g., if you sleep better, you're more likely to be able to have physical activity, and if you have physical activity, you're more likely to sleep better. Exercise reduces stress by lowering cortisol and increases our endorphins. It reduces the time it takes to fall asleep, or the time we spend laying awake at night, and the time we exercise can actually directly change our circadian rhythm. Plus, it improves slow wave sleep, the quietest and deepest bits of REM. Exercise, like having a reasonably healthy diet, also helps with our weight, and if our weight is a trouble for us, it might increase our chances of snoring or having sleep apnea. Healthy diet and exercise also improves our health and lowers our risks of getting different medical conditions that might impact on our sleep quality. And then finally, well-exercised muscles are less likely to get injured, and injury is pain, and pain stops us sleeping. And while we're talking about health and medical conditions, a really good tip or solution is to see your GP. Get some medical intervention. If you're one of those 10% of people that have got insomnia, then get some support around it. And I mentioned that lots of physical health issues will really impact on your sleep, and all of them will have very specific treatments depending on what the physical health issue is. For example, I talked about postnasal drip as an acute thing. Have a couple of cushions behind your head so that you can lean forwards. I talked about myself suffering from tinnitus. Having some kind of white noise in the background can help. And if we've got other of those health conditions that have been mentioned, like Parkinson's or pain, spasms, tics, sleep apnea, restless leg, go to your GP. Get some medical advice. See if that symptom, the thing that's keeping you up, the urge to urinate constantly in the night, maybe we've got a bladder infection. See if you can treat the source of it rather than, I don't know, just trying to muscle your way forward. It's said in homeless services that if our room is messy or we're starting to neglect our self-care, like shaving or looking after ourselves, that's often one of the first signs that maybe there's bits in our lives that are becoming a bit unmanageable. And I think the same's with sleep. If we're starting to feel disturbed in our sleep, then maybe it's symbolic of other things that are difficult in life. So maybe one solution to sleep is to have a bit of a check-in in general, how you're doing in life. How are your relationships? How's your family? How's your partner? Finances worrying you? How's your time? Are you enjoying what you're spending your time doing? Does it feel like there's a sense of accomplishment, of meaning in life? We take our car in to have an MOT every single year. Maybe we sort of need to do the same thing to ourselves. Review. look at different elements of your life, how it's going. Have an MOT full of self-compassion, build up self-awareness, allow the painful thoughts that plague us in the night to be there in the day. Speak to us. Tell us the ways we wish we could grow. Final thing I'm going to say before the quickfire round, where we go through things that we hinted at in the barriers, is don't force yourself. Sleep isn't a cognitive thing that we can think our way into. It's a state of relaxation that we drift into. If you find that sleep isn't becoming and you can't fall off, forcing yourself just makes us angry and frustrated with ourselves rather than actually bringing the sleep that we desire. Maybe even accept it. This is how it is tonight. It's going to be one of those nights where sleep doesn't come easily for whatever reason that it is. Get up. Turn on a light. Not too bright, not blue. Turn on a light. Read something. For me, sometimes just opening my eyes, looking up at the darkness, exploring different dark parts of a room can help me to settle down, but trying really hard to fall asleep, putting pressure on ourselves. It's ironic, it's one of those dimensions of life where the more pressure we put on it, the harder it seems to be. So yeah, that's my last tip for the quickfire. Don't force yourself. Just allow whatever is there to be there, including a sense of sleeplessness. Quickfire round. Don't sleep in the day. Don't drink caffeine after 4 o'clock. Stay away from that blue light an hour before bed, including mobile phones. Work on your phone habits before bed. Avoid eating 2 hours before bed or snacking on sugary food. Avoid benzodiazepines or sleeping pills unless it's for acute issues. Don't watch telly or have cigarettes when you wake up. But sleep in a slightly cool, low sensory environment. Have a routine. Use meaningful uses of time to keep you going. Keep a diary or journal to jot down things that are on your mind. See your GP if you have health issues. Use meditation or mindfulness to calm yourself down, distract yourself from those ruminating thoughts, and ready yourself for sleeping. Avoid forcing yourself if you can't sleep and just wake on up. Exercise as part of your routine, but not directly before you go to bed. Consider starting a sleep diary to document how your sleep changes over the week. Get yourself some sunlight so you can get synthesizing that melanin, and if you have SAD or live in a particularly dark country, try and get yourself a SAD light for some light therapy. And finally, make space in the day for being bored. Part 4. How can counselling help? I had a splinter the other day, and it started to get a little bit infected, started to hurt, and I realised that it wasn't just going to come out on its own. It needed to be worked out with a pin, and I just couldn't do it to myself. It hurt so much. And so, with help from someone else, my wife, we managed to dig it out, and it hurt, but you know what? My finger has recuperated nicely. I think it's the same with counselling. Sometimes there are things that sort of hurt us, things that play on our mind at night, and we can try and dig them out on our own, but the pain of it's just too much to really be able to get in there and remove that splinter that's on our side and keeping us awake at night. Counselling can give us space to talk through things that are sometimes painful with somebody who we don't have to worry about offending or if they're going to be okay. We don't have to share the conversation. We can just talk about what's on our mind, and that other person will receive it. And more than that, they receive it with empathy and acceptance that allows us to be able to take a really good look at it and find movement. I'm guessing before you watched this, you probably knew a lot of the solutions I mentioned. What I didn't disclose at the start of this video is that I ran this as a group for people in recovery from substances, and most of the answers in this talk came up from that group, from like-minded people like you or me, not experts or special people. It just came from ordinary chaps. Knowing a solution, knowing an answer, isn't always enough to change us. There's something about discovering it within ourselves, discovering unique strategies that work for us and work for our sleep. Something about working with somebody one-to-one that is really interested in us, that wants to know about our sleep journal, the particular nuances of what sleep's like, what our worries are like, what the barrier is, what's happening for us, so that they can help us to find answers within ourselves that are accessible and work for us. Maybe with some guidance, but it's about equipping rather than just telling what to do. Like with the splinter example, counselling allows us to go deeper than we might be able to go just on our own, to have it kind of reflected back, to have a companion with us. And that can bring rest to sleeplessness in a way that just reading information online doesn't. This has been Bun Bun. He is a childhood teddy bear rabbit that I was given when I was first born, so he is older than me, and I figured he would be a really good companion to have on this talk, seeing as he spends pretty much his entire life either sitting on the bed or down the side of it. And my name's Simon. I'm a counsellor. I work online, through telephone, face-to-face if you live in Oxford. I've got a office on Cowley Road, or I'm happy to do home visits if you live within the ring roads. I have a website, www.simonslistening.co.uk, where you can read an abbreviated version of the script for this. I'm also on Facebook at Simon's Listening Counselling Services. And then finally, if you're watching this video, then please do like, please do subscribe, do check out some of my other videos, learn how to be more self-aware using a hot cross bun. If you're interested in things like video gaming, and if that can help with mental health, then check out the video there. There's some really good CPD if you're a therapist or a person in general want to know more about bereavement and grief. And then I make 3 very short 1-minute shorts, reels per week on little reflections on life and how that's spoken to me, often with messages on things like autism or grief or death anxiety. I am procrastinating, but very slowly working on some scripts for how arts and crafts might be able to help with our mental health, or the darker side of video game addiction. And I'm coming up to my first 1,000 hours of client work, so I was thinking of doing a video on 1,000 hours over like 5 years or so of being a counsellor. Thank you so much for listening. I would be really, really interested to read your comments if there are any tips, solutions, things that have stood out for you, anything that's been helpful for you to help you to sleep. Please do bear in mind that anything that we put as a comment on YouTube is out in the public domain, so just beware of confidentiality, that anyone can more or less read it. But thank you again for listening, and I look forward to catching you again. Bye.